Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this TDL webinar. It's the second in a trilogy of sessions looking at cybersecurity trends in 2025 and beyond. And we're delighted to have a really esteemed panel of speakers from different backgrounds to guide us through this particular session, which is looking at threat agents and human behavior. And to help us to do that, we have our strategic advisor, Claire Vishik, who will moderate the session. For the attendees, the session will be recorded and a report will be made available within a few days. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, David, for the introduction, and thank you for hosting us today. A lot has been said about the human aspect of cybersecurity. Hundreds of thousands of articles were written, various standards were created, including several standards describing threat agent ontologies. It is a topic that may be one of the most complicated in cybersecurity, simply because human behavior is much more complex than technologies that are built for a certain purpose, simply because there are many things we still don't understand in how various threat agents, from disgruntled employees to nation states, operate under certain circumstances, especially with the new threats. Artificial intelligence input a different component in the human aspect of cybersecurity. This is a tool shared by the attackers who now can automate the attacks and create them faster without a significant knowledge of the topic, and by the defenders that now have a better tool um, to find new malware, to understand how certain things operate, to understand very complex data sets. But still, a topic is very interesting. Many questions have no answers. And there were many significant events in 2025. Our distinguished speakers are going to talk about it today. Here is the panel today. We are fortunate to have, in alphabetical order, Koen Maris, who is head of cybersecurity advisory at Atos. We have Massimo Felici, who is a security consulting senior manager at Accenture in Belgium. We have Mike Loginov, who is a co-founder of Cybersecurity and AI Governance Initiative. And finally, we have Walter Peters, who is professor of work organizations and digital technology at Radboud University. With this, let's start with your high-level views on the subject and its state in 2025. What was new, what was important, what was substantial in the human aspect of cybersecurity? Koen, would you please start and share your thoughts?
Sure, I'm happy to be here. First of all, I think a big shift is going on. We are moving away from awareness to something that is more oriented to behavioral change, and micro learning can help us with that. Many of the awareness campaigns that we did were periodically, meaning every 3 months, every 6 months, in the worst case, every 12 months. I think we need to have a continuous learning, and that's something I see that is popping up recently, and especially this year. This is maybe also due to the fact that AI, of course, is targeting customers and organizations a lot harder, because you can, of course, tailor it better than ever before. And people need to be aware about that, and they need to change that. Trust is not something that is a given anymore. And zero trust is perhaps something that we need to apply in many fields and not only in the technology field.
Thank you very much. When you are talking about awareness, are you talking about end users, developers, defenders, whose awareness is the most affected by the current situation and technology mix?
Well, that's a good question, but I think we're all affected. I don't think an end user is more exposed than a developer or vice versa. The types are probably different. If we speak about spear phishing, it's probably different because they can now better target the people with AI and tailor the message that it speaks to them. They feel related, which is, of course, extremely dangerous.
And how do you think we can carry out continued awareness? Several, annual events, a lot of conferences, a lot of books, a lot of lectures are available, but this is not enough. Or what else do we need to do?
Well, I think we need to stop thinking that people need to be told what they have to do and how they have to do it. They need to learn behavioral change, and that you can only do by doing so. It's not about telling you the message, but it's you experiencing the problem, and that's a different approach, I think, and we need to put more emphasis on that. That's at least how I see it. I've been doing awareness since 2004, 2003, which is a long time ago. Back then this worked, but today it doesn't work anymore. I think experience is the best learning mechanism today.
I agree, especially for something like cybersecurity. Some experiences, of course, we don't wish to include and be part of, but it's necessary to understand how dangerous attacks could be, how much more than we are today. We need to be prepared. Thank you, Koen. Massimo, what is your view on the state of the field?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think is as was mentioned already, there is a rapid adoption of AI. So this, of course, creates new opportunity for business. Also, but of course, also creates new types of threats for anyone, as was mentioned. So for all of us, and the problem there that I see that is with the rapid adoption of AI. We still are facing that there is at the same time a shortage in terms of talent. So we mentioned awareness, both in terms of skills. So both in terms of AI skills and cybersecurity skills. So this is something that in the market is still persistent. So where we have limited types of talent, and now because of the rapid adoptions of solutions like AI, so this is also creating an additional kind of risks for all of us. And mainly means at the same time also that while we are trying to adopt new opportunities with emerging technologies like AI, so at the same time, the solutions are not evolving with the same times, the cybersecurity solution with the same times. So and there is a widening gap in terms of talents and skills, both in AI and cybersecurity, that is exposing more organizations to emerging risk. And with this condition also making more difficult for us to cope with.
A lot is being said about the role of cybersecurity in the progression and evolution of cybersecurity for both the attackers and the defenders. So thank you for bringing it to the table and providing your thoughts on this. What are the problems you think that cannot be solved with artificial intelligence at this point? I am referring to the issues associated with the human behavior, with the human aspect of cybersecurity primarily.
I think for me is we are trying, at least my personal view is that we are still trying to tackle a lot of big problems. So AI can create a lot of opportunities, but in reality, we have to look more into details how AI is impacting the activities of individuals. So going more towards personalized solution of AI, and also making sure that we automate the activities that can be automated. Sometimes we approach AI as a kind of solution for everything. In reality, I still like organization needs to invest in maturing their capabilities to understand where AI can bring their kind of benefit. So it's not a solution for everything, and we still have a limited understanding what can be solved in reality, and also changing a cultural shift. So it's not a race of competition, human against AI, but also everyone can work in combination with AI capabilities. So mainly means is defining those solutions, enable solutions that can enhance the work that human perform. So human will be always in the loop.
Yeah, it's impossible to disagree with this. So you believe that at this point, artificial intelligence is more an automation tool, but we don't want to experience the erosion of expertise with over-reliance on cybersecurity on artificial intelligence beyond automation, data processing, process improvement, and so on. Is that correct?
Yes, but the thing is also, as we mentioned, there is a lot of organizations are currently embracing a lot of training programs and skill development program, also reskilling workforce to enable them to make the most of AI, or also to become also more vigilant of the new types of threats in terms of cybersecurity awareness. So mainly means also the entire workforce needs to be trained to make the most of the opportunities, but also to become also the first line of defense towards kind of emerging threats. So all organizations should become aware of the threats from anyone involved in the commercial organization, from society. So everyone has a role to play. But the problem is not everyone at the moment has the same has access to knowledge, skills, and solutions they can use.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am sure we will return to this aspect of the topic. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's been major changes really in the last few months, and certainly the last year or so. 2025 has seen huge advances, as we've been hearing about, in the use of AI within the cybersecurity world to create new approaches, new, more sophisticated approaches. I think attackers have really stopped waiting for humans to make mistakes, and using new technology, they've now started to engineer the mistakes for us. So much more sophisticated, much more difficult to spot the quality of the attacks. We can no longer rely on human intuition in order to determine whether something feels right or not right. Sometimes the quality of the communications that we're getting from the adversaries are better and feel more trustworthy than some of the corporate communications that we're getting on a daily basis. So I think that in itself, when you put that all together, and add it to the fact that we're training AIs and LLMs now with AI psychometrics. So it's taking all the human psychometric data that we've captured as employees, looking to get a job or for a promotion, and learning from all of that in order to manipulate the human psyche into making mistakes. So I think we've moved beyond training. I think training just doesn't cut it anymore. I think that's, for me, and I'm really sort of falling back on my experience here as a corporate CISO for the last 20 years, having been at the coalface, doing all this training, doing all this awareness. I've always thought that it's been a bit of a cop-out, putting the emphasis on individuals. Yes, we've got to train them. Yes, we've got to make them aware because it's what we do and it feels like we're doing something positive. But I think, to me, we're at a point now where the technology has to protect us, has to protect humans. We cannot operate at the pace and the speed that the silicon, cognitive aspects can do. As carbon entities, we got to eat, sleep, we're emotional. We're waiting for our next coffee and biscuit, whilst AI does none of that stuff. It's constantly on, it's omnipresent, it's everywhere. We're talking about agentic AI in companies now where there's 10 agents for every employee in that company. As a CISO, one of my big challenges was shadow IT, just knowing what was in my environment, my threat landscape. Even before AI become prevalent, was always a challenge. What are we using? What have we got? What can't I see as a chief information security officer? What I can see, I can defend. And I think AI is really muddying the waters there big time. And I think our adversaries are recognizing this and really, starting to ramp things up. And just as a final line, I think AI has really advanced things for the adversaries to the point where it used to be nation states and nation state capabilities that were able to do the sort of things that individuals can now do using that technology. So it's come on leaps and bounds, and I think we're behind the curve from a cybersecurity perspective. So, yeah, I think in summary, I think we've got to get the technology doing more work to help defend us. Trusting that technology becomes more important going forward. How do we do that? How do we know we can trust it? What controls do we have in place? And so, yeah, big shifts, and I'm sure we'll talk about what's going to happen as we move into the future and that perspective as well.
A very interesting view. So you think that training individuals is not as effective as it used to be. I mean, primarily end users, and we need to rely on technology simply because it is now easier to build more devastating attack. It's easier to build more attack. It's easier to build them in a way that is more effective.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying don't do training. I'm definitely not saying don't do awareness. I'm just saying I think we need to be much better. We've got to be more advanced, and we've got to get the technology up to scratch. We just can't keep up with the silicon, the speed of the internet. We can't do it. So, attacks are happening now in milliseconds and seconds. Governance takes years to implement. And changing cultures can take years to implement. And so we're well behind the curve.
Thank you. And what can help foster this trust in technology that you mentioned earlier? You are engaged in governance-related activities, in associated standards. Do you think it's possible to standardize human behavior to a way that technology can address it better than it does now?
Well, I think, look, as human beings, as complex as we are, we're also fairly simple, pattern-based entities. We respond and react in certain ways, mostly governed by the legal aspects. There are things that we can do in a corporation that as an adversary, I wouldn't be limited by, perhaps. So the constraints that we have set against, an adversary is and has always been a challenge. Yeah, sorry, Claire, what was the bones of the question there? My mind was drifting off a little bit there.
I asked if it is possible to standardize aspects of human behavior enough that it's adequately reflected in technology.
Yeah, I think that is a key way forward, is we've got to find some way, some control mechanism over the use of AI, how it's deployed in organizations. I know there are some incentives in the governance aspect in terms of that control. And before we release AI or new AI entities or capabilities, that certain testing has to take place. And if it doesn't meet a standard, then it doesn't get released. And I think we need to be very cognitive of that. We need controls around that. But also, as an international standard, that's very difficult. I know there are the sovereign AI frameworks, for example, are something that are being developed by many countries now. But those frameworks require governance across the whole AI stack, from 6 core elements, from data management through to the technology that's used, through to frameworks and other areas as well. And to get that as an international standard across competing nations, never mind economically, but more from a political geopolitics, from developing military technologies. Countries will always be looking for a one-up on the military side of things in defense of their nations. I think we can collaborate on stuff that impacts global economies like malware and that type of thing. I think there is good cross-border operability across organizations at that level. But as always, and I think again, it's always been the case that where there's a nation can gain an upper hand, particularly in the current environment on a military basis, then it will want to hold on to that or develop it for its own good. But there are areas where we can get standards that impact the whole of the human race. And I think that's where I'm coming from, really. It's not so much about economic benefit or even military benefit, but stuff that we as a race need to be on top of. One of the concepts is that we can just unplug it. Well, can we? Is that possible? If it's omnipresent, if it's everywhere, it's part of our living on a daily basis, is it actually possible now to switch off AI if we had to? I somehow doubt that's the case. So I'm just really coming from the perspective that we need to be giving much more thought to how do we get our arms around these bigger potential challenges of the impact of something that we really don't know about. And the old adage of, let's deploy it, we'll see what the problems are and we'll fix them afterwards. That's a very different and dangerous concept in this new world of artificial intelligence, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, excellent points. Certainly, they give me a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much for sharing them. Walter, you look at series of human behavior and organizational structures and how they interoperate. What is your view on the subject?
Yeah, let me emphasize that I had two key things on my list that were already mentioned by the previous speakers, but let me repeat them. One is indeed the move away from awareness towards behavior change, in the sense that throwing knowledge at people is only one of a much bigger repertoire of techniques that you can use to try and change behavior. And this is somewhat related, the emphasis on the individual as the one who is responsible for making this happen. When awareness campaigns are being run, it's like, oh, you do this training behind your own computer, and then you get a checkbox that you've done it, and then I'm like, why don't you sit together, do this, talk about this, make it a social activity? Because in the end, we are social creatures. And somehow embedding this in something that's social, that's motivating, may help to move a bit away from this emphasis on individual awareness as a key thing. Also, because it seems, and this holds in many other domains, but here as well, we have the tendency to, oh, there's a gap here. There's some kind of gap. There is a cybersecurity thing that you need to take care of. Oh, by the way, you also need to check these AI decisions because we need responsible AI, so we have to check what AI does. And we say, okay, technology cannot do this, so the human has to do this. And here's your stuff, go do it. And in terms of motivation, this is not really working. So we overload is a big thing these days, right? Information overload, choice overload. People get overloaded with all kinds of things. So that we need to stay away from, and instead we need to see this as part of a bigger structure of the work design of people that should somehow be both motivating and responsible. So that's a key thing. And this indeed requires also some organizational changes. Well, culture change was already mentioned. Culture is pretty abstract, but talk about it in evaluations. Do the trainings in teams. So those are a couple of things that could be done there. So this I think in general, we need to move away from psychologically unrealistic expectations of people. And this is something that's a long story in this area. And with the shift from awareness towards behavior change, we're moving a bit in that direction because there's different techniques that you can then rely on. One other thing that I'd like to mention is first a different point. Yes, the AI-enabled social engineering and those kinds of things are relevant, but a lot of things are things that didn't go very well in the first place. Data ending up in the wrong place, is not being deleted when it should be, and now people are throwing all kinds of sensitive data into Gen AI, and it's. But this wasn't very good to begin with, and Gen AI now makes it worse. So we also need to be careful to not think that AI is completely new, but the shadow IT and etc. Those are things that were already there and are now getting worse because of AI. Final point. I think we also need to pay attention to human factors in the incident response. Most of the time, we're talking about threats and how you protect against those threats. But I think there's a lot to be gained in terms of understanding how human factors play a role in how organizations respond to incident and whether this happens effectively or not. And in particular, again, the role of collaboration in teams. How is information being exchanged? Does this happen in an effective way? And even also there, if you throw AI into the equation, how can we build human AI teams that respond effectively to cyber threats? Because again, and I agree with what was said previously, we need to think about what a meaningful division of tasks between humans and AI is also in the context of cybersecurity.
Thank you, Walter. Do you think that the format of awareness, you mentioned team training, you mentioned positive reinforcement, culture changes. Do you think the format is going to be an effective tool against the rapid evolution of various attacks?
No, but in a way it wasn't all the phishing exercises and those kinds of things. Then you get the click rate down from, I don't know, 20% to 15%. Like in the end they will get in anyway. So in that sense also this is not completely new. So also here awareness should not be a goal in itself, or even behavior change should not be a goal in itself. Because if throwing a lot of effort into behavior change and asking a lot of effort for people to actually engage in those activities, if this is not reducing the risk, then why are we doing it, right? But this is also not a completely new story. And yes, threats may get worse because of AI. And indeed, this is again the point. If on the defense side AI can do better than people, then why should we bother people with all those kinds of things? But it's an arms race, right? And in that sense, also with AI, it remains an arms race, but now some new weapons come into the equation.
Thank you. It's difficult to disagree with this. And looking at the statistics in organizations in response to phishing training, for instance, I can see that the number of errors remains relatively static, even though this training is offered again and again and again. So there are probably avenues for improvement, but also clear weaknesses in the approaches that we are using now. It's important to link the attacks and the threat agents that perform them. That has always been, or at least has been for 20 plus years, an important component of mitigation. Has anything changed recently with regard to the threat agents, and how should we respond to those changes? Koen, what do you think?
I think if we look at it to the basic point of it conceptually, not a lot has changed. to be honest. I think Mike was right. The volume and the speed where things are going or moving forward is just incredible that we, with our simple brains, cannot wrap around it. And we need technology, of course, to help us. But there is always a but, because we are humans. And I follow what Walter said as well. Look, if you look in the history of what we have been doing, and especially around the human factor, in the beginning, trainings were given in person, but then it became a compliance check, and suddenly we were thrown around with all these boring videos and then simple questions, and you get them right or wrong. It doesn't even matter anymore. People need experience. And the best thing is in-person training, maybe micro trainings, maybe put them in a situation that is delicate. Because remember, when we were all kids, how did we learn things? By failing. How do you want people to learn? Hopefully not by failing in production, but by a simulated failing in a safe environment. And that's still things that I'm missing. The threat agents on itself didn't change that much. The volume is just higher, and sometimes it's a bit more complex than it was 10 years ago. But yeah, ransomware is already quite some time around, and it hasn't really changed in how it is deployed. Of course, the way they get in might change, but eventually it boils down to the same thing. And we are very bad, apparently, in noticing that, because we speak a lot about IT today, but in the OT space, I see similar errors popping up as Mike was confronting probably in his role 15 years ago. And that's, of course, a pity. We don't seem to learn or share the knowledge that we have across different subjects in IT or in technology, if I want to take the IT part out of it. So in that sense, no, I don't think that it changed that much. But what we are doing is pushing, and I don't know who said it, Massimo or Mike, but we are pushing a bit the responsibility of the defense onto the end user. That's, of course, not the right thing to do, because they are not responsible. And by doing that, we are not giving them the right tools to defend. In my talks, I like to speak that 25 years ago, we were building virtual castles around our network with the firewall between us and the evil internet. Well, the castle isn't there anymore. We've drilled so many holes in the walls that it's just an open door today. If the castle doesn't work, we need knights. And we still need those knights, and companies need to train people that they know how to fail. I think that's the most important thing in awareness. We try to prevent failure, but we cannot. You said it. The statistics show that training results remain more or less the same year in, year out. So we need to find another way. And I think learning by doing and putting people into a position where you know they will fail gives them the best possible way to learn. Now, let's be honest. Most of the things are also a bit common sense, and it seems that we have lost common sense and we rely too much on technology. The dependency on technology is so big today that people underestimate the importance of it, and they lose common sense combined with that, which I think is, of course, a recipe for disaster.
Thank you, Koen. This is not what I had in mind as a situation when I started this line of questioning about threat agents. But I agree with you. It's really, there is clearly a difference between a script kiddie and a nation state. And how do you address those threats? No one debates that. But in the end, it's the end user of different kind that bears the brunt of those attacks. And when we look at it from this point of view, it evolved in a way exactly that you described, that awareness became more impersonal. Failure or success don't matter that much on an individual level. That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Well, Massimo, what do you think?
Agree on the sense that the cyber threat landscape is not changing per se. What is changing is mainly the intensity of the cyber threats and the volume that we experience. One thing that for me is changing is how organizations in general are exposed to these cyber threats, to the emerging cyber threats. In particular, if you look at what's happened in the last maybe couple of years for different kind of reasons, the geopolitics, the different kind of events that have changed also the way we trade internationally. So that means organizations are trying to find new strategy to get organized their business. So, for example, one of the things that we see is that they are organizing their global supply chain. So this is because they're trying to adapt to the market needs or to other events, geopolitical events, or other events as the ones that we experienced like a few years ago, like the pandemic events. They're trying to reorganize their global supply chain without thinking if there is any potential impact from a cybersecurity point of view. And this is also what means is the cyber threats are there, but the way organizations are exposed is changing as well. And one of the things that another additional elements that I would like to add is that sometimes we see due to, again, to geopolitics, we see that we are not talking anymore cyber threats, but probably cyber physical threats. We see more the kind of attacks are becoming more hybrids. For example, unfortunately, I'm sitting in Brussels. We have seen also there is the use of drones and this is maybe types of not pure cyber threats, okay, but also involve technologies, how critical infrastructure are exposed to emerging kind of threats. And this is again, is not that the cyber threats were not known, but what is changing is the intensity of those threats and also the way we as organization, society are getting exposed to them.
Very, very interesting. If you put the new technologies forward in this way, cyber physical systems and attacks against them have become pretty common, and also the supporting factors to make these attacks more visible, including the global supply chain and its implications. Well, a very interesting point of view. Thank you very much. Walter, the organizations need to adapt to this new environment, even though probably the effect on the organizations is similar, even if the distribution of threats and the prevalence of threat agents is different. What are the main changes that happened recently, maybe even in 2025, and how do you view this aspect in general?
Well, I think with the advance of technology and also the better protection of systems, there's a couple of things that are happening. One is, and I'm not sure how relevant it's here, but it's kind of striking. In the Netherlands, we've seen an explosion of crime based on fake police officers. So because it's too difficult to do digital attacks, they're just going to the doors, phoning people that there will be some police officer coming in, and then they just rob the house or whatever they do, or get bank cards, all those kinds of things. So there's an explosion of these non-cyber things, precisely because we get better protected in a way. So that's kind of interesting. And on the other hand, we of course see the more advanced things going on, which with the use of AI and all those kinds of things, which we labeled cyborg crime at some point. Like it becomes almost impossible to figure out where the humans are in this whole network and where the technology is, and it's all this hybrid stuff. That's so on the one hand, the more high tech, on the other hand, more low tech. So it's kind of dichotomous thing. I'm exaggerating a bit, but this is one. The other important development is because of geopolitics. digital autonomy becomes a very big topic. At least we see it here in the Netherlands. Everybody's talking digital autonomy now. And this, of course, also has implications for how organizations arrange their stuff, because if they want to be digitally autonomous, they need to they can't rely on the usual suspects anymore to some extent, and they need to do other stuff which may also be less advanced in terms of protection. So there is a trade-off there. And also, if you want to do this, and you already see this, this will also affect individual autonomy. And cybersecurity does this anyway. Does this anyway. But especially now, if you want to become more digital autonomous, people will have less autonomy in what they do with their individually, what they do with their information technology. So if you look from psychology, and this also ties in with what I said before. You have a theory called self-determination theory, and there's three main drivers there: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Well, competence, that this is something, hey, can I do this? Relatedness, I've pointed out the social aspects, but also this autonomy. And so I think a key challenge is there also, if organizations now want to do more with this digital autonomy, again, how do we get people to move along with such a transition? So I think that's one of the challenges.
Absolutely. The way to describe digital autonomy in the context of cybersecurity is actually quite complex. It's a situation where the more autonomous you are, the less protected you are, probably. You may be less visible, but you also lose access to some obvious protections.
Yeah.
Another thing that you mentioned is very important also. It's something that I see as well. Low-tech crime leading to cybersecurity consequences. That has become definitely more common. Thank you very much for sharing this. Mike, what do you see with regard to the topic that Walter started, the threat agents distribution, maybe greater prevalence of nation states in the inventory of attacks? At the same time, the issue of autonomy, the low-tech entry points, how does it play out where you stand?
Yeah, again, I think those are challenges that we've always had and probably continue to have. It's the crossover points between the various stovepipes, whether it's physical security, as we've heard. Previously, one of my roles was carrying out security audits in companies, and the easiest way was always to breach it physically. Tailgating and the usual opportunities to do that. Go in, drop a keylogger on a CEO's laptop or his PC, and sit outside and watch what he's typing, and from that start to craft attack vectors. And those are the sort of things that we used to do. So I think as a professional adversary, my objective is to get into an organization, compromise it without being caught, and whatever means I can use, I will use to do that. And sometimes the physical means of walking in, as I said, and planting devices or whatever, or picking up a file or going through the garbage. All of those old techniques are still viable today and probably still widely used. I just think the proliferation of AI agents across organizations adds to the threat landscape, and as much as how do we police that? One rogue agent is all it takes. One badly determined agent that's there to exfiltrate data invisibly may not be so easy to spot. So I think the complexity of agents is making a big difference. And in terms of, we had this whole thing, didn't we, for a while around data sovereignty, where nations really wanted to keep their data safe and security within their borders. How does that play out with AI? When we've got cross-border AI with everything, filtering up into global clouds or local clouds or whatever, but interconnected in some way. So I think it becomes very difficult to get to a sovereign AI framework. There's a couple of nation states that are there. The US is there. It's pretty sophisticated from that perspective. China is there. It's pretty sophisticated. And I think France is on the heels of getting there. But the rest of the nation states are pretty far behind in terms of getting to that AI sovereignty aspect, much in the same way as we wanted data sovereignty.
Thank you. Data sovereignty is a more solvable issue than AI sovereignty. When you use the compendium of all the information the humans created as your training foundation, it's very difficult, even if certain information was deliberately excluded in the grand scheme of things, to create an environment where certain things are completely invisible. They are always visible to some extent. And the experiments we ran in our research demonstrated that it's frequently quite easy to reconstruct information that is supposed to be confidential based on responses on similar but different topics AI provides. It's a little bit similar to the early aspects of anonymity in the 1980, I think in the late 1980s, where there were a number of papers on how you can reconstruct social security numbers and identities of people by combining several databases. With AI, you combine a much greater number. So do you think sovereignty is a serious guardrail in terms of cybersecurity and access to information that's supposed to be confidential? Or do you think it will be an increasingly minor aspect of artificial intelligence and the role it has in cybersecurity? What do you think, Massimo?
For me, I mean, is what I see like is at the moment, although there are opportunities that are offered by AI, still many organizations don't have AI-related capabilities. And of course, like sovereignty is one element that could be a requirement for many organizations, but then some steps they can start to take or think about. First of all, what is security governance for AI? So do they have this kind of governance in place internally for a security point of view? And of course, this means also taking into account our sovereignty as well. There is also another element like is building security inside AI developments. So there is many AI developments in terms of data gathering. I see echo coming from. Apologize. I see echo. Okay, so mainly is what I say like is we need to develop also security in AI developments. So building AI security elements in